Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you on Tag Tuesday. This is the Star Trek book tag created by James Holder, which bears no relationship to the Star Trek book tag created by J.D. Archer that I did 4 years ago. This is a different Star Trek book tag, and I'm always up for a Star Trek book tag and make one myself tomorrow. So we're just gonna launch onto this thing, and the first prompt is the original series. Pick a book that influenced you or has been influential in your choice of career. The original series, of course, referring to the original incarnation of Star Trek, which I heard about, I heard was coming, and expected the worst. I expected this would be more horrible television science fiction. I was regularly having my mind blown by Astounding and Asimov's and Omni and all of these science fiction magazines and science fiction novels that I got at the spinner rack at the grocery store, and I didn't completely blame TV science fiction for how bad it was. I didn't completely blame it. I thought you're partially responsible, but look at the things that I can read on any given page of any science fiction novel or short story that you couldn't possibly do. The special effects was hardly even a term that we used, except Ray Harryhausen. I didn't think it was even possible to do. Outside of like drawn animation, I didn't think you could do it live action. So I didn't realize how much leeway I was giving shows on TV to be bad because of that. And then Star Trek came up. The original Star Trek came up. James Holder is too young to remember watching the original Star Trek as it came out, but I am not, and I was blown away. Not by the special effects. It took a whole 50 years for eye-popping special effects to be added into those original shows. I saw some of those episodes in the old farmhouse in Vermont and was blown away. And yet, the addition of the special effects to those remastered versions of the Enterprise of the original Star Trek only served to underscore how unnecessary they were. They're wonderful to look at, but the original shows jumped out at me and thousands of other people like me because of how good it was. Because of how good it was. Because you had at least an attempt at genuine science, and because you had great characters. Great characters who were consistent from episode to episode, who built from episode to episode, you could like and dislike in moments. They would be likable and dislikable, and sometimes in the same episode. For me, the episode "The Naked Time," where all of our characters are stripped bare to their unguarded inhibitions, was a personal moment for me, where I'd seen glimpses of it before then, even in the original, in the first few episodes. But that was the episode where I thought, okay, well, this show knows what it's about. It knows that it's about character. And for me, in terms of special effects, Star Trek didn't have that bad. Well, the special effects weren't that bad. They never took you out of the story. But for me, it was the attitude towards the special effects that really made a difference in the show. During one episode, when Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott turns to Captain Kirk and says, "I can't change the laws of physics. I've got to have 30 minutes to do what you're asking." That, I don't know if it'll be lost on young viewers of that episode, but that was unheard of in television science fiction. It was unheard of that you would ever come up against actual science like that in a way that would determine the outcome of the show. I just loved it, absolutely loved it. But in terms of career, if we're talking about my current career as a book reviewer, we're going to cast our eyes back to the halcyon days of 1971 and to the novel Rabbit Redo by John Updike, which was so bad on every level. Conceptually, its misogyny, its mean-spiritedness, its implied racism, its implied classism, the ineptitude of its prose, the poverty of its vision, the snottiness of its entitlement, everything about it. So awful. Even worse than its predecessor book, as the second in the Rabbit Angstrom books, that I felt compelled to tell the world. I felt compelled to lay out a case against it, to rip it to shreds. And at the time, back in 1971, this is going to shock those of you who are young, there was no way to tell the world anything except to get it published in a newspaper. In a newspaper. Write a letter to the editor used to be the thing that we would just toss off to someone as a caustic insult about how self-important they were being. So I did that, and I continued doing that, and I stopped for a long time, but in most of my life I have done that. So that would be the start of a career, would be Rabbit Redo by John Updike. And then The Next Generation is the next prompt. Pick a book that is in the same genre as the original series, published between 20 and 100 years earlier, referring to the fact that Star Trek The Next Generation takes place 70 or 80 years after the era of Kirk and Spock. which was handled a bit rockily at first. It went over sort of poorly. William Shatner famously gave an interview and said, I'm okay with the show. I just wish they wouldn't call it Star Trek. And in an early episode of The Next Generation, we're told that Kirk and Spock vanished, that they disappeared. They obviously did not. Their fates are well known, and it became clear to the showrunners later on that we're going to need these people, and we're going to need the tapestry of history to be complete. So we can't just make a break between us and them. The Federation of 70 years ago has to be very much alive in the present day, of The Next Generation. Unfortunately, none of the rest of the original series was alive in The Next Generation. The show was boring, talky, pokey, ill-conceived. What on earth is the ship's counselor doing on the bridge of a starship? What on earth is she doing there when the ship's doctor is not? When the ship's engineer is not? Why would the ship's counselor be on the bridge of the Enterprise? It makes no sense at all. Why would you trust an android to be an officer on your ship when this android has an off switch, a literal off switch, that if someone knows about it... and this android has no it does not have a functioning emotion chip. It's a plot device for treachery and sabotage, just waiting to happen, and a million other reasons. Just none of it was well conceived at all. An alien vessel is firing weapons on the Enterprise, rocking everybody on the bridge, throwing people over consoles for 15 minutes, and then. Only then does the ship's counselor, who's on the bridge for some reason and who is a telepath, an empath, say, I sense hostility. Thanks. Why don't you go to your office and fill out paperwork? We'll call you if we need you. But anyway, if we jump forward 20 years from Rabbit Redo, and if we stick to our theme of absolutely crappy, iconic American fiction, that would bring us to American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, a book that is absolutely worshipped by Dude Bro, by the Dude Bro lit group. Not all Dude Bro lit lovers love this book, but most of them do. The vast majority of them do. And it's all the ones who love it the most are the ones who are themselves problem cases waiting to happen. The book, famously, is a raunchy and horribly explicit, inside the head account of a guy who appears normal on the outside, but is in fact psychotic. He is in fact a murderous, inhuman creature. And if you watch enough BroTube, whether it's on YouTube or on Instagram, invariably, when I see somebody holding up that book, or when I see somebody using a GIF from American Psycho, or quoting from American Psycho, when they make it clear that they love American Psycho, I know perfectly well that within a day or two, the next upload of theirs, whether it's on YouTube or BookTube, or whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, is going to show them at the firing range. I know that. I know that beyond a doubt, and it always happens. It's a bellwether book, not just on whether or not you like it and how much you can tolerate, but on whether or not you yourself are a psycho. Whether or not you are... If you think that Patrick Bateman is cool, then you need inpatient care psychiatric treatment immediately. And there are lots and lots and lots of young white men, weightlifters, who do think exactly that. They tell you they know the message of American Psycho. They tell you they know the message, but they don't get it at all. They think he's cool. And he gets cooler as the book goes on, in their opinion. So I would say American Psycho. And had I been reviewing books in 1991, I would have taken it behind the woodshed. I would have been happy to do it. Anyway, on to Deep Space Nine, the next Star Trek iteration, which broke with form in Star Trek TV shows in quite a few ways. The first and foremost of which is that the commander of Deep Space Nine is a Star Trek, a Federation Deep Space station, which had been taken over. It wasn't Federation design. It had been taken over by from the Cardassians. And the man who's put in charge of it, Benjamin Sisko, hates the captain from Star Trek The Next Generation, Jean-Luc Picard. Quite rightly hates him, because Jean-Luc Picard was co-opted by the Borg and laid waste to an entire armada of Federation vessels, including a vessel that the wife of Commander Sisko was stationed on. So she died at the hands of Jean-Luc Picard, as far as he's concerned, not at the hands of Locutus or Borg. That not all is peachy and fine in the sunlit universe that Gene Roddenberry imagined. for the original series, that was fascinating. And the show just kept getting more and more fascinating. It was the version of Star Trek that was the most divorced from the Homo sapiens only club that's mentioned in Star Trek, The Undiscovered Country. There were whole scenes, sometimes whole episodes, where all the speaking characters were not human, and that was terrific. And Federation history started to be written in Deep Space Nine. The showrunners decided, let's have a major event happen. Let's have the Alpha Quadrant, the whole space quadrant that includes the Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans. Let's have it all invaded by someone else and see what happens. And that was awesome. Absolutely awesome. The great novel of the Dominion War has not been written. Little segments of it were, and then they were put together. But a truly great novel about the Dominion was the name of that extra quadrant enemy, and there was a gigantic war that it consumed the Federation, consumed the Klingon Empire, consumed the Romulans. All three of those eventually teamed up. A dream story for original show fans. And I guess Paramount's not interested. I'm sure that someone has pitched them, can I write that volume? Can I write a huge novel of the Dominion War? And I guess they're not interested because it's never happened. It's never appeared except in fan fiction. That's a shame. And the great novel of Deep Space Nine has never been written either. It suggests itself. Of course, the great novel of Deep Space Nine would be written by Jake Sisko, the son of Captain Sisko, who was a writer by trade and who was there the whole time. He grew up on Deep Space Nine, knew all these people. That's a novel just waiting to be written, and it hasn't happened. But the Deep Space Nine prompt is pick a book with a strong sense of setting. And for that, I want to stick with 1991, I think, the year, and pick The Famished Road by Ben Okri, an author that I've been increasingly enjoying going back to his old works. And The Famished Road is a weird book, weird and totally controlled, about it's about a Nigerian town, but it wavers in your view like an object in the distance in heat mirage between the real world version of that town and the African folklore version of events that are just overlaid and weaving in and out of it. It's an amazing performance, just amazing. Reminds me a lot of Bruce Chapman's The Songlines. Then the next prompt is Voyager, Star Trek Voyager, in which a Starfleet vessel is thrown across the universe, or across the galaxy, 75,000 light years away from the Federation, so that even at maximum warp, it would take them forever to get back home. Maybe a couple of younger characters on board, or the Vulcan weapons officer, or the the hologram doctor would survive, but most of the crew would not. They would die of old age, even if they had no other problems getting back. And the Federation captain, Captain Catherine Janeway, who makes that decision, she makes the decision to strand her vessel 75,000, 80,000 light years from home, because she won't kill in order to prevent it. She has a choice, a moral choice. And she makes the right choice, even if it strands her crew far away from their families and friends forever, for as far as they know, for the rest of their life. It's a fantastic way to start the show. The showrunners clearly knew that Kate Mulgrew could handle anything they made her do, so they decide to make her one of the greatest captains that we've ever seen. She's incredible. And so is the rest of the show. Just fantastically done. I absolutely love Star Trek Voyager. Although it has some of the worst episodes of any Star Trek franchise ever, I think it has some of the best episodes and is one of the most universally watchable of the shows. And the prompt for this one is pick a book about a journey or voyage. And I want to pick here... oh, wait. Did I mess that up? Oh, well, no. I want to set up a theme here, because I want to recommend these things. I don't know if they're in ebook form, but the voyage that I want to recommend is there's a voyage that's actually in the title of a great Star Trek show, the Star Trek: The Voyage Home, the Star Trek movie, the one about the whales. That's how everybody thinks of it. It's a terrific, heart-warming movie, so totally well done. And it was written, the novelization of it was written by Vonda McIntyre, a fantastic science fiction author who did a lot of Star Trek work. And it is about that voyage. The book is about the voyage that's portrayed in the movie, which is a voyage in time. And I want to recommend Vonda McIntyre's book, if you can find a copy. I don't know if it's an ebook, but I want to recommend it as long as we're sticking with Star Trek here. I could have done, like with J.D. Archer's original tag 4 years ago, I could have done all of my answers to Star Trek books, but I stopped myself at the last minute because of how tedious that would be. Then the next prompt is Star Trek Enterprise, the much beleaguered, much hated Star Trek Enterprise, which was the first Star Trek of the ones that we've mentioned, aside from the original show, to be canceled before it reached 7 seasons, before it came to its own organic conclusion. And it is set before Kirk and Spock and McCoy. It's set a whole generation before them. In the early days of Starfleet, before there was a Federation, with a smaller and much more submarine-like, much more mechanical Starship Enterprise. I loved it, absolutely loved it. I thought the show was just fantastic, visually beautiful, and crisply, perfectly acted. It was the first Star Trek show that was conceived and executed from its first minute in complete awareness of what it was, in a way that even Voyager was not at the beginning, where everything about it was crisply aware of where it had to fit and what it could do. And that really comes through. It really does. The show gets better as it goes along. I was sorry to see it go. And the prompt here is pick a book published between 20 and 100 years before your original series pick. Now, original series pick was 1971. And in 1871, Middlemarch was published. And I strongly recommend that you read Middlemarch by George Eliot. The first part of Middlemarch was published in 1871, and it is terrific. I am strongly considering doing a read-along of Middlemarch for these beleaguered days in 2020, right alongside my Trollop read-alongs. Then the next prompt is Star Trek Discovery, rightly referred to by its alt-right critics on YouTube as STD. Pick a book that has divided fandom or community. And the reason why Star Trek Discovery has divided the fandom, there are two reasons. There are two reasons, because there are two fandoms. One, the alt-right, BroTube, YouTube, paleo-sexist commentators, there are a huge number of them. They are known colloquially now in the year 2020 as toxic fans, as toxic fandom. For them, the thing that divided the community about Star Trek Discovery was that the main character was a woman, and a woman who was in white, a non-white woman was the main character. For them, that was all it took. That was just, no, absolutely not. We hate this. We hate them. We hate women. We have beards down here. We are neckbeards. We have enormous Coke bottle glasses. All the women in our lives hate us. We've been married and divorced many times. We don't refer to women as women. We refer to them when we're on camera as whammon, and when we're off camera, and sometimes even when we're on camera, we refer to them by another word. A word that is the way that we refer to them with our male friends. We only have male friends. Even if we're married, we only have male friends. And we refer to them in one particular term. For that segment, for toxic fans, that was all it took. But there was also a very large segment of Star Trek fans who hated Star Trek Discovery, and for a totally different reason. The actress who plays Michael Burnham, the main character in Star Trek Discovery, is extremely talented and extremely charismatic on camera. It's not her that I, myself, for instance, as one of those old-time Star Trek fans, are objecting to. It's the fact that this is the Michael Burnham show. Michael Burnham is not a captain. The showrunners, when they were talking up the show, said that is one of the ways why this will be so revelatory, so amazingly new, is that we're not following a captain. I don't see what's wrong with following a captain. It's kind of a good tradition to uphold, but even so, Michael Burnham is an officer on board the Starship Discovery. And it's not that she is brown-skinned, it's not that she is a woman that upsets the other contingent of Star Trek fans. It's that it's not Star Trek. It's Michael Burnham. It's the Michael Burnham show with guest stars. And Michael Burnham is, consciously or not, a pure, what the other side, the toxic fandom, will refer to as a pure SJW. She's a pure SJW protagonist. She's very young. She doesn't have anything like the experience of a whole bunch of characters who are all around her, and yet the implication and the explicit statement of the show in every minute of every episode is that she is smarter than everyone around her, easily so that she pities them for how they're not as smart as she is, including Vulcans, including machines. She is effortlessly smarter than everyone around her. She's effortlessly more compassionate than everyone around her. she's effortlessly more capable. Everything she tries is easy for her to accomplish. Unless some well-meaning but be better, some dumb other person gets in her way. People are constantly getting in her way. Why don't they just do what she says? She's always right. She's more insightful, more compassionate, more intelligent, more forward-thinking than anyone who has ever existed. And it's just when people get in her way and don't see that things go wrong. That's why in the first episode, when her commanding officer tells her not to do something, she simply nerve pinches her commanding officer into unconsciousness. And when she is thrown in prison for the rest of her natural life for that, for committing treason, for committing mutiny, the clear implication of the show is that we're supposed to feel sorry for her. We're not supposed to want to see her shoved out an airlock. We're supposed to think, why won't the galaxy just conform to her? Come on, be better. That's why the other half of Star Trek fans hates the show, because that's not what the show's about. The show is an ensemble thing. It's an ensemble show. It has been from the beginning in every incarnation. It's not the Michael Burnham show. I hoped that, and it's just the way that the show is executed is just so noxious. Because of that, nothing matters except Michael Burnham and her immediate revelations. Oh no, don't follow through on your prejudices. They'll get us all killed. Can't you be like me? The concentration of the show on that is so great that basics are overlooked. And in another example of the 21st century concentration on social justice, warrior politics over anything else, fan reactions to all of that were clearly negative from the beginning, and the studio just ignored that, doubled down on it. It wasn't just it wasn't just toxic fandom that didn't like it. It was everybody that didn't like it, with a tiny, tiny sliver of people who said, well, Michael Burnham kind of looks like me, so I don't care what you do with the rest of the legacy of Star Trek. I just want that. So that's why it divided the fandom up. But James Holder wants to know, pick a book that divided the fandom, and this happens every season. The one that's still on my mind is American Dirt by Janine Cummins, which was attacked by Own Voices censors all over the bookish medium. That, how dare you use your imagination to write about the plight of immigrants on the southern border of America? How dare you do that if you weren't one of them? I checked your biography. You have no right to write this book, and this book shouldn't exist. Your book is under contract. It already exists, but I still want it burned. I saw on Twitter people whose Twitter biographies mention not only their pronouns, of course, but also that they love books. And then you look on the timeline when it gets to the American Dirt period, they want it burned. So American Dirt divided the bookish community, in my opinion, between fascists who only happen to like books and bookish people. And then the last one is Star Trek Picard, which bothers me. The idea of it bothered me at the start because I thought, this is explicitly Star Trek Discovery. This isn't even, you're not even hiding behind a vessel's name. You're explicitly making this a one-man show. But the first few episodes of Picard are not only very well done, but they're all about assembling an ensemble. They're all about that. That's literally the theme of the first 4 episodes. So, and I have to assume that's continuing. I'm not going to watch Star Trek Picard unless I watch it over wine with Mark Richardson at the old farmhouse in Vermont. So it will be another casualty of this pandemic until the pandemic lifts. But the episodes that I saw were extremely well done and weren't what I was expecting. They weren't what I was worried about at all. I'm not 100% sure that it's Star Trek, but maybe Star Trek has changed. But if so, it's changed in this direction, not in Star Trek Discovery. But the prompt for Star Trek Picard is a book that wears its influences on its sleeves. And for these, I want to go back to Vonda McIntyre, because it isn't just Star Trek The Voyage Home that she wrote from the Paramount scripts and did such a great job that her book is actually as enjoyable as the movie. It's also the previous 2. Star Trek The Wrath of Khan and Star Trek The Search for Spock. And she wrote these books in a way that shows you that they really are what you can tell if you watch them back to back on Netflix or whatever. They really are one movie. They really are one enormous arc of Kirk and Spock and emotion and friendship. All the way from beginning to end. All the way from the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, to the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many, to you'd have done it for me. You'd have done the same for me. It's the I know there are plot lines that are involved, of course, but there's a through line of those three movies that is amazingly good, and it comes out better in Vonda McIntyre's novels than it does in the movies themselves. So, for my last one, of course, they wear their influence on their sleeve because they're novelizations of movies. And that's my answer to this last one, is that you might be tempted to just overlook those because they're novelizations of movies, and novelizations of movies are often wisely overlooked. But in this case, they're worth finding. They're worth reading. They're really good. I wish I had copies of all three of them. I don't, I think, have copies of any of them. I used to have all three of them in hardcover. But anyway, that is the James Holder version of the Star Trek book tag for Tag Tuesday. So we now have at least 2 Star Trek book tags out and about in the wild. Maybe I should make my own. Maybe I'll do that for next Tuesday. I'll make another Star Trek book tag, so we can't have too many of them. But anyway, the last thing to do is tag people, and the problem with a Star Trek book tag is that I don't know. It wouldn't be as much fun if it weren't done by a Star Trek fan. And James Holder himself tagged all the people on BookTube that I happen to know are Star Trek fans. I don't know if anybody else is. If you are a Star Trek fan and you haven't done this, by all means, do it. I'd love to hear your answers. But anyway, this has gone on long enough. I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.